The hallway was cold, not the kind of cold that comes from weather. It was the kind of cold that lives inside metal walls and old secrets. The kind of cold that tells you, something is wrong here. Cale walked slowly. His boots made a low sound on the steel floor. Every step echoed. He had been a soldier for 6 years. He had walked into dangerous places before. He had faced things that would make other men run. But this hallway felt different. He checked the paper in his hand one more time. Cell Block 7, Sub-Level 4, Guard Duty. Solo assignment. That was strange. Guard duty was never solo. There were always 2 soldiers. Sometimes 3. But today, just him. He had asked his commander why. His commander had looked away and said, "Just do your job." Cale. That was not a good answer. He reached the door at the end of the hallway. It was heavy, dark gray metal. There was a small lock pad on the side. He pressed his hand against it. The light blinked green. The door opened with a slow, heavy sound. Cale stepped inside. The room was dim. Only one light worked, a pale blue strip on the ceiling. There were old crates on one side, some broken equipment in the corner, and in the middle of the room. He stopped. He had expected a prisoner. He had prepared himself for something dangerous, something big, something that looked like a threat. What he saw was not that. Sitting on the floor, with her back against the wall, was a girl. She was small. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, like the ocean just before a storm. Her hair was long and pale, almost white, falling around her thin shoulders. Her ears came to a soft point at the top, and on her forehead there was a small circular device. It glowed faintly like a dying star. She was wearing a simple gray dress, too thin for the cold room. Her wrists were connected by a thin metal chain that was locked to the wall beside her. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the floor, and she was crying quietly, like someone who had learned long ago that crying loudly was not allowed. Cale stood there for a moment. He did not move. His hand was still on the doorframe. All his soldier training was telling him to stay professional. Stay distant, do the job. But something else, something older and quieter inside him, was saying something different. He cleared his throat. She looked up. Her eyes were large and dark, a deep blue-green like deep water. They were wet from tears. She stared at him without speaking. Not afraid, more like she was waiting. Like she already knew what was going to happen next and was too tired to fight it. Cale looked around the room again. He checked the corners. He looked at the ceiling, old habit, checking for threats. There was nothing. Just cold walls and the small chained girl. He looked back at her. "You are the prisoner?" he asked. His voice came out quieter than he meant it to. She said nothing. He stepped inside and let the door close behind him. He walked to the far side of the room and stood there, not too close, and crossed his arms. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. She blinked. That was all. He had been told one rule before entering, just one. His commander had put a hand on his shoulder, looked him in the eye, and said, "Do not speak to the prisoner. Cale, do your shift. Watch the door. That is all." Cale had nodded. He had meant to follow that rule. But then she wiped her face slowly with the back of her chained hand and looked at him again with those tired, deep eyes, and something in him broke a little. "What is your name?" he asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she said, "I don't have one anymore." Cale felt something cold move through his chest. It wasn't the room this time. He opened his mouth to ask what she meant, and that was when she looked directly into his eyes and whispered, "You should not be kind to me, human." She glanced up at the small camera in the corner of the ceiling. "They are watching." Cale did not sleep that night. He sat outside Cell Block 7 on a small metal chair, his back straight, his eyes open. But his mind was somewhere else. It kept going back to her words, the way she had said them, not like a warning, more like a goodbye. "You should not be kind to me, human." They are watching. He had spent 6 years in the military. He had met criminals, but a small crying girl with no name had kept him awake all night. That said something. Morning came slowly. The pale lights in the hallway shifted from dim to slightly less dim. That was how you knew it was morning on a base with no windows. Cale stood up, stretched his neck. and picked up the small metal tray from the supply shelf near the door. On it was a cup of water and a portion of standard food rations. Basic, plain, not good, but enough. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. She was in the same spot, back against the wall, knees pulled up to her chest, the chain still on her wrists. Her eyes were dry now, no more tears. She looked at him the way a person looks at something they are trying to figure out. Careful, quiet, thinking. Cale walked over and set the tray down in front of her, not too close. He stepped back and stood a few feet away with his arms at his sides. She looked at the water, then at him. Then at the water again. She did not touch it. "It's not poisoned," Cale said. "I know," she replied. Her voice was clearer now than last night, small but steady, like a thin wire that looks weak but does not break. "Then drink it," he said. She looked at him for another long moment, like she was making a decision about something much bigger than a cup of water. When she finished, she set the cup down and looked up at him. "You came back," she said. It wasn't a question. It sounded more like something surprised her, but she didn't want to show it. "It's my shift," Cale said. "Your shift ended 2 hours ago," she replied. Cale said nothing, because she was right. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Why did you stay?" He pulled the old metal crate nearby and sat down, not like a guard, more like someone sitting across from another person. He looked at her and asked the question that had been in his head all night. "What did you mean? You don't have a name anymore." She was quiet for a moment. Her fingers moved slowly over the chain on her wrists. Not nervous, just something to do with her hands while she thought. "My people have a technology," she began. Her voice stayed calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes from explaining something painful so many times that the pain has gone numb, every few cycles. "They wipe our memory, all of it, everything we know, everything we feel, everything we are, gone. They call it a reset." Cale stared at her. "They erase your memory? Completely?" "Completely," she said. "My name was erased 3 resets ago. I don't know what it was. I don't know where I was born. I don't know if I had people who loved me. I don't know anything before the last reset." The room felt smaller suddenly. "Why?" Cale asked, and his voice came out harder than he planned. Not at her, at whatever system had done this to her. "Because a soldier with no past asks no questions," she said simply. "A soldier with no memories has no reasons to disobey." She said it like she was reading from a manual, like she had heard those exact words before, probably from the people who did this to her. Cale leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked at her directly. "So right now, you have memories? From after the last reset?" "Yes," she said. "About 8 months of them. And they are going to take those too?" She looked down at her hands. "In 48 hours, she said quietly. The words landed heavy. Cale sat up straight. 48 hours? That's when the next reset is?" She nodded, still looking at her hands. "They moved it early. I heard them talking outside the door last night. Something changed in their plans. They are transferring me after the reset. New location, new mission, new me." She smiled when she said new me, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the saddest kind, the kind that has given up on being anything else. 8 months of memories," Cale said slowly. "And in 48 hours, all of it disappears." "All of it," she confirmed. Then she looked up at him, directly, no blinking. "Including you." The room was very quiet. Cale felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not anger, something worse. Something that sits between helpless and furious and doesn't know which way to go. He looked at her, this small blue girl with a borrowed name and a countdown in her chest, sitting chained to a wall in a cold room, and he thought, this is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. But before he could say anything, she grabbed his hand fast, both her chained hands wrapping around his. Her grip was stronger than he expected. She looked at him with wide, urgent eyes. "Before it happens," she whispered, "will you talk to me? Will you tell me real things about yourself, about your world?" Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. "I know it sounds strange." She continued quickly, like she was afraid he would say no. "But in 48 hours I will forget everything. So right now is all I have. And I don't want to spend it alone in this corner, talking to no one." Kale looked at her hands holding his, then at her face. "Please," she said, very quietly, and something in Kale shifted. Quietly, permanently, like a door that had been locked for a long time finally deciding to open. He did not pull his hand away. There are moments in life that change a person, not the big ones. Not the explosions or the battles or the times when death walks close. Those moments are loud. Everyone feels those. Everyone remembers those. No. The moments that truly change a person are the quiet ones. The ones that happen in cold rooms, on metal floors, between two people who were never supposed to meet. Kale was starting to understand that. He didn't let go of her hand right away. He sat there for a moment. A soldier who had held weapons, who had held wounds closed on a battlefield, who had held himself together through things most people couldn't imagine. And he let a chained alien girl hold his hand because she asked him not to be alone. Then slowly, carefully, he turned his hand and held hers back. She looked down at that, at the way his fingers wrapped around hers, like it was the strangest and most surprising thing she had ever seen, like no one had done that before. Simply held her hand like she was a person worth holding on to. She didn't say anything, she just held on. "Tell me something," Kale said after a while. His voice was quiet. "The kind you use when you don't want to break something fragile. Your people, the ones who do the reset, they are not humans, right?" "No," she said. "Then why are you here, in a human base?" She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully, like someone walking across thin ice. "I was sent here," she said, "before my last reset. They gave me a mission: gather information, study the humans, learn your weaknesses. I was supposed to be invisible, walk among your people, watch, listen, report back." Kale looked at her. "A spy." "Yes," she said, without shame, without pride. "Just a word, just a fact. But I was caught before I could do anything. Your people found me near the Eastern Communication Tower 3 weeks ago. I had not sent a single report yet." "So you failed the mission." "I failed the mission," she agreed. "And now they are coming to reset me, fix me, and try again with a newer version of me that will not get caught." She said newer version of me like she was talking about a broken machine being repaired. Not a person, not a life. Kale felt the anger move through him again, slow and hot. "They treat you like a tool." She tilted her head slightly. "Because that is what I am to them. That is not what you are." She looked at him. Something flickered behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or something more fragile than surprise. "You don't know what I am." "I know what you are not," he said firmly. "You are not a tool." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked away, like the words were too heavy to hold while also looking at the person who said them. "Can I ask you something?" She said after a silence. "Yes." "Does it scare you, the idea of forgetting?" Kale thought about that honestly. "I think losing my memories would feel like dying," he said. "Like everything that made me who I am just disappearing." She nodded slowly. "That is exactly what it feels like," she said. "Except you wake up afterward. You open your eyes and you are breathing, and your heart is beating, and your body is alive. But the person who was inside, she is gone. And the new one doesn't even know to grieve her." The words sat between them like smoke. Kale looked at her, really looked at her. At the tiredness behind her eyes that was older than her face. At the careful way she held herself, like someone who had learned that showing too much would always be used against her. At the small glowing device on her forehead that was counting down to the moment it would erase everything she currently was. "How many times?" he asked quietly. "How many resets?" She thought for a moment. "The ones I know about, 3. The ones before that, I have no way to know. I could be 20 years old. I could be 100. I genuinely do not know how long I have existed." Something about that broke a specific part of Kale's chest that he hadn't known was there before. "And between each reset, do you ever try to fight it? Try to run?" She smiled again, that same small sad smile from earlier. "Every time," she said softly. "Every version of me tries, and every version of me fails, because they don't just erase your memories. They also erase the memory of trying to escape. So the next version wakes up and thinks, maybe this time it will be different. Maybe this time they will treat me well. And she believes it, because she has no reason not to. She paused, until she starts to remember what people are capable of. Cale was quiet for a long time after that. Outside the cell, he could hear the distant hum of the base, machinery, footsteps, voices, the ordinary sounds of a world continuing on without any idea that in this small, cold room, something deeply unfair was happening to someone who deserved far better. 46 hours now. He could almost feel the clock moving. He looked at her and made a decision, not the loud, dramatic kind of decision that soldiers make in battle, but the quiet kind, the kind that settles into your bones and stays there. Then let's make these 48 hours matter, he said. She looked at him. I'm going to talk to you, he continued. I'm going to tell you everything. About me, about Earth, about what it feels like to have a history and a name and people who remember you. And you are going to tell me things too. Whatever you remember, whatever you want. We are going to fill every hour. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. You deserve to be remembered by someone, Cale said simply, even if only for 48 hours. A single tear ran down her blue cheek. She didn't wipe it away this time. Cale started with small things. That was how humans always started. He had learned that a long time ago. You don't begin with the big things, the important things, because big things need a foundation first. You build up to them, slowly, like stacking stones, so he started small. There is a place on Earth, he said, leaning back against the cold wall beside her, not across the room anymore, beside her, called a forest. She looked at him. I know what a forest is. You know the word, he said, but have you ever stood inside one? She was quiet. The trees are so tall, he continued, that when you look up, you can't see the sky, just layers and layers of green. And the light comes through in thin pieces, like the sun is trying to reach you, but the trees keep catching it. He paused, remembering, and it smells like, I don't know how to explain it. It smells like the earth is breathing. She had gone very still. Her eyes were not looking at the wall anymore. They were looking somewhere else, somewhere inside the picture he was building with his words. Go on, she said softly. So he did. He told her about rain. Not just that water fell from the sky. She knew that. He told her about the sound of it, the way it starts quiet on the leaves, like someone whispering, and then gets louder and louder until it's all you can hear. He told her about the smell right before it comes. That sharp, clean smell that makes the air feel new. People on Earth have a word for that smell, he said. What word? Petrichor, he said. It's only for that one specific smell, the earth after rain. We liked it enough to give it its own name. She repeated it quietly like she was tasting the word. Petrichor. Yes. Your people named a smell. We name everything we love, Cale said. She looked at him when he said that. Something moved behind her eyes, slow and deep, like something shifting at the bottom of still water. He told her about his mother's kitchen, the way it always smelled like something warm, even when nothing was cooking. He told her about Sunday mornings, a human concept she found fascinating. This idea that one day of 7 was simply set aside for rest, for family, for doing nothing important, and feeling no guilt about it. One whole day, just for living? She asked. Just for living, he confirmed. She shook her head slowly. My people would never allow that. Every hour is accounted for. Every hour has a purpose. Rest is only permitted when the body requires maintenance. That sounds exhausting. I didn't know it was, she said, until right now. Then he told her something funny. It was a small story about his first week of military training, about a drill sergeant with a voice like a broken engine, about Cale making the spectacular mistake of falling asleep during a strategy lecture and snoring loudly enough to wake himself up in front of 40 soldiers and one very unamused commander. He told it simply, the way you tell a story to a friend. And something happened that stopped him mid-sentence. She laughed. Not a polite sound, not a small, careful reaction, a real laugh, sudden and bright, like a light turning on in a room that had been dark for a very long time. Her whole face changed when it happened. The tiredness lifted for just a moment. The careful, guarded expression disappeared, and for one small second, she was just a girl. laughing at a funny story. Then she caught herself. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, like she had done something wrong. Like laughing was a thing that needed to be immediately corrected. Cale looked at her. "Don't do that." "What?" "Don't apologize for it," he said. "You didn't do anything wrong." She slowly lowered her hand. "It felt strange," she admitted quietly. "I don't think I do that often, any version of me." "Then we have been doing you a serious injustice," Cale said. She looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Something open, something unguarded, something that looked almost dangerously close to trust. "Your world," she said softly, "sounds painfully beautiful." "Painfully?" he asked. "Because I will never see it," she said simply, without self-pity, just truth delivered quietly, the way she delivered everything. The laughter was still faintly in the air between them, like an echo that didn't want to leave. Cale looked at her, really looked, and thought about how unfair it was. This girl, this person, whatever version of herself she currently was, sitting here in a cold room, laughing for maybe the first time, about to have it all taken away. He wanted to say something, something that would fix it or fight it or at least hold it back a little longer. But before he could, his radio crackled. His commander's voice came through flat and hard like a door slamming. "Cale, step away from the prisoner. She is scheduled for reset and transfer in 24 hours. I am watching the feed. Do your job, do not get attached." The room went quiet again. Cale looked at the small camera in the corner, the one she had warned him about on the very first night. Then he looked back at her. She was already looking at him. Her face was calm again. The guard was back up. The walls were back in place. But her eyes couldn't hide everything. Both of them knew what was coming. 24 hours. The clock had never felt so loud. "Some requests are easy. Can you pass me that? Can you help me with this? Can you stay a little longer? These are easy. These are the kinds of requests that cost nothing. The kinds that leave both people exactly as they were before. And then there are the other kind. The kind that come quietly, in cold rooms, from people with countdown clocks inside their heads. The kind that once answered, change both people forever." Cale was about to receive the second kind. He just didn't know it yet. The hours moved strangely after the commander's voice came through the radio. "Time does that. It slows down when you want it to speed up, and it speeds up when you are desperately trying to hold it still." Cale had noticed that about time his whole life. It never cooperated. He stayed in the room. He knew he wasn't supposed to. He knew the camera was watching. He knew his commander was probably 3 corridors away, getting angrier with every passing minute. He knew all of that, and he stayed anyway. They talked less after the radio crackled. Not because there was nothing left to say. There was everything left to say. But because some hours don't need words. Sometimes 2 people can sit in the same silence, and it means more than 100 conversations. She had her knees pulled up to her chest again, her chained hands resting on top, her pale hair falling over one shoulder, the small device on her forehead still glowing, still counting, always counting. Cale sat on the floor now, his back against the wall beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, far enough that he was still pretending, to himself mostly, that this was still professional. It wasn't professional. It hadn't been professional since the moment he asked her name. It was somewhere in the middle of the night when she finally spoke. Not about Earth, not about memories, not about resets or missions or the people who had built a life out of erasing hers. She spoke carefully, like each word was being chosen from a very small and precious supply. "Cale," she said. "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. Her fingers moved slowly over her own forearm, back and forth, a small unconscious motion, like she was thinking through her skin. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Okay, you can say no," she added quickly. "I want you to know that first. You can say no, and I will understand and we will not speak of it again." Cale turned his head to look at her. Something in her voice was different, not afraid. She never really sounded afraid, but careful. The way you sound when something matters too much. "Ask me," he said. She took a slow breath. "The reset," she began, "erases everything in my mind, my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, all of it gone." She paused. But it does not touch my body. It never has. The technology only reaches the mind, not the skin, not the bone, not the marks that have been made on the outside. Kale was listening, very still. I have been thinking, she continued, her voice dropping lower, about what survives a reset, what crosses from one version of me to the next. She looked down at her forearm, at that small back and forth motion her fingers kept making. And the answer is, only my body, only what is written on the outside. She stopped. The room was so quiet that Kale could hear the distant hum of the base systems, the low mechanical breath of the building around them, and nothing else. I want to carve your name into my skin, she said. The words landed like something dropped from a great height. Not because of pain, she said immediately, reading his expression. I need you to understand that. It is not about pain. I have had enough pain. It is about leaving something behind for her, for the next version of me who will wake up empty and confused and afraid. I want her to look down and see something she cannot explain, something that makes her feel less alone. Her voice stayed steady through all of it. That was the thing about her. She never performed emotion. She just had it, quietly, like a fire that doesn't need to be loud to be real. If your name is on my skin, she whispered, maybe she will wonder about it. Maybe she will trace the letters and feel something she doesn't have words for yet. Maybe she will look at a human one day and feel not afraid. She finally looked up at him. Her eyes were dry. She had made a decision before she asked. He could see that. She was not asking with tears to make him feel guilty. She was asking with clear eyes because she had thought it through. And it was the only thing she had left that she could actually do. I know it is a strange thing to ask, she said quietly. I know it sounds like something broken trying to fix itself with the wrong tools. It doesn't, Kale said. You don't have to. It doesn't sound broken, he said again, firmly, gently, the way you hold something carefully in both hands. It sounds like someone trying very hard to survive in the only way they have left. She looked at him. Something in her face, that last wall, the final careful layer she kept between herself and the world, shifted, not gone, just shifted. Will you let me? She asked, barely above a whisper. The room held its breath. Kale looked at her eyes, then at her hands, then at the small glowing tool clipped to the side of her chain, a standard marking instrument, the kind used for equipment labels, low intensity. More like a pen than a blade. It would not hurt deeply, but it would stay. He looked back at her face, and slowly, without a word, he extended his arm. He turned it over, the inside of his wrist facing up, pale and steady in the dim blue light. She stared at it. Your arm? She said, confused. I was going to mark my own. I know, he said. But let me go first, she blinked. I want your name on me too, he said quietly. Whatever name you choose for yourself tonight, I want to carry it, so that someone in this universe is walking around with proof that you existed, that this version of you right now was real. Her lips parted, no words came. For the first time since he had met her, she had nothing to say. Her eyes filled, slow, like water rising, and one single tear ran down her blue cheek and fell onto the cold floor between them. She reached out with her chained hands. She picked up the small glowing tool. Her hands were shaking. There is something sacred about writing a name. Most people never think about it. They write names every day, on papers, on packages, on birthday cards, and it means nothing. It is just letters, just ink, just habit. But sometimes, in certain moments, in certain rooms, between certain people, writing a name is the most important thing in the world. This was one of those moments. She held the glowing tool carefully, both hands chained together at the wrist, wrapped around it like it was something that could break. Her fingers were thin and blue and trembling slightly, not from fear, from the weight of what she was about to do. Kale sat perfectly still. His arm was extended, the inside of his wrist turned upward, steady in the pale blue light of the room. He did not move. He did not rush her. He just waited. The way you wait for something that deserves patience. She looked at his wrist for a long moment. Then she looked up at him. Are you sure? She asked. I already told you yes, he said. I know, she said. I am asking again because once I do this, it stays. Good, he said simply. I want it to stay. She held his gaze for one more second, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for any small sign that he was doing this out of pity rather than something real. And she found none. She looked back down at his wrist, and she began. The first letter was K. She pressed the tool gently against his skin. The light at its tip glowed faint cyan as it moved. It did not cut. It marked, like writing on warm glass, leaving behind a thin luminous line that would darken and set into the skin over the next few minutes. She drew it slowly, 2 diagonal lines meeting in the middle, one straight back standing tall. Cale felt the warmth of it, mild, barely anything. But he watched her face while she worked, and what he saw there made his chest tighten. She was focused, completely, fully, entirely focused, like this was the most important thing she had ever done. The second letter, A. Her hands were still trembling, but her lines were steady. She exhaled slowly between each letter, like she was giving each one its own breath, its own moment. E. Cale watched a tear form in the corner of her eye. She didn't blink it away. She let it sit there, let it blur her vision slightly, and kept writing anyway. Braver than any battlefield, braver than any soldier he had ever known. L, the last letter. She drew it carefully, a straight line down, then a clean line along the bottom. She held the tool there for just a moment longer than necessary. Then she lifted her hand. She stared at his wrist. K-A-A-L, 4 letters, glowing softly in the dim room, already beginning to darken into the skin. They would be permanent by morning. Faint but clear, like something that had always been there and was only now becoming visible. She didn't move, she just looked at them. Cale looked at them too, his name written by her hands, on his skin, and felt something he had absolutely no words for. Something that had no military classification, no tactical definition, no place in any training manual he had ever read. It felt like being known. Now you, he said quietly. She looked up. He reached out and gently took the tool from her shaking hands. She watched him, something flickering in her expression, surprise mixed with something softer. He held her arm carefully, her blue skin cool against his fingers. He looked at her. What name? He asked. You choose. She blinked. I told you, I don't have a, tonight you do, he said. Right now, in this room, you get to choose whatever feels right, whatever sounds like you. She was quiet. He waited. The room waited. She looked down at her own arm for a long moment. Her lips moved slightly, silently testing sounds, trying words the way you try on something unfamiliar to see if it fits. Then, Lyra, she said softly. I think Lyra, Cale repeated. She nodded, something certain and fragile settling in her eyes at the same time. It sounds like something that was mine before they took everything, like a word I knew once and forgot. Then that's it, he said. That's your name. He turned her arm gently and brought the tool to her blue skin. L-Y-R-A, 4 letters, glowing, setting, staying. She watched every single one with her whole body, still as stone, barely breathing. Like if she moved, she might disturb something delicate being built letter by letter in the space between them. When he finished, he held her arm in both hands for a moment, looking at her name on her skin. Now they cannot take it completely, he said. She opened her mouth to respond, and the alarm screamed, loud, red, wrong. The overhead light in the cell block shifted from pale blue to harsh red, bathing everything in the color of urgency. Somewhere down the hallway, footsteps, fast ones, multiple. Cale was on his feet instantly, soldier instinct taking over. He looked at the door, then at her. What is that? She asked, though something in her eyes said she already knew. His radio burst to life. All personnel, reset team has arrived early. Repeat. Reset team is on site. Cell block 7 will be accessed in 1 hour. Clear the area. This is not a drill. 1 hour, not 24. 1. Cale looked at Lyra. Lyra looked at Cale. The name on her arm was still glowing. The clock that had been counting down for days had suddenly, without warning, become the most urgent sound in the universe. 1 hour, 60 minutes, 3,600 seconds. A number that sounds like enough until it is all you have left. Kale had been in situations where time ran out before. On battlefields, in burning buildings, in places where the difference between 1 minute and the next was the difference between alive and not. He knew what it felt like when the clock became an enemy, but nothing in 6 years of war and survival and loss had felt like this. He did not leave. The alarm was still crying red through the hallway. The footsteps outside were getting louder. His radio had crackled 3 more times with his commander's voice telling him to clear the area. He had turned the radio off. He sat back down beside her. Lyra was looking at the door. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were dry. She had the expression of someone who has known this moment was coming and has spent a long time deciding how to meet it. Not with panic, not with tears, with something quieter and harder, a kind of stillness that takes more courage than any loud fight. "You should go," she said. "I'm not going, Kale." "1 hour," he said, looking at her. "They can have you in 1 hour. Right now you are still here. You are still Lyra. And I am not spending a single minute of this standing in a hallway following orders." She looked at him. Something in her face broke open, just slightly, just at the edges, and then she pulled it back together. She nodded once and turned toward him and said, "Then talk to me. Tell me everything you haven't told me yet fast." So he did. He talked fast. He told her about the first time he saw snow, real snow, falling snow, when he was 7 years old and his mother had woken him up before sunrise to stand on the porch and watch it come down in the dark. He told her how it was silent in a way that nothing else is silent, like the whole world had agreed to stop making noise for a while. She closed her eyes while he talked. He understood. She was building the picture, making it real inside her head before they came to take her head away. He kept going. He told her about the ocean, how it was so large that standing at the edge of it made every problem feel small and every human feel small, and somehow that smallness was a relief rather than a terror. He told her about the sound of it at night, that constant low breath, like the planet itself was sleeping. "I want to hear that," she whispered, eyes still closed. "Just once." "Someday," he said. Before he could stop himself, she opened her eyes. They both knew what someday meant and didn't mean. Neither of them said it. He told her about people he loved. His mother, a small woman who laughed too loud and apologized for nothing, and made the best food in any building she had ever entered. His friend Davin from training, the kind of person who made every room warmer just by walking into it. His grandmother who had lived to 91 and claimed it was because she argued with everyone she met and the stubbornness kept her heart strong. Lyra laughed at that one. That laugh again, sudden and real and lit from somewhere inside. She pressed her fingers over her mouth right after, like a reflex, and then slowly, deliberately, lowered her hand. She was learning not to apologize for it, he noticed. He didn't say anything. He just kept going. 40 minutes left. "Tell me something about yourself," Kale said. "Something you remember, anything." She thought for a moment. "I remember a color," she said slowly, "from before the last reset. I don't know where I was or what I was doing, but I remember a color deep gold, like something warm and setting, like the last light before dark. I don't know what made it. I don't know who was with me, but I remember the feeling of it." She paused. "It felt like safety," she said quietly. "Whatever it was, it felt like the safest I have ever been." Kale looked at her. "Hang on to that," he said. "Keep that one as long as you can." She nodded. Very slightly 20 minutes. The footsteps outside were closer now. Voices, official ones, clipped and procedural. The voices of people who were doing the job and felt nothing about it. Lyra looked at the door. Then she looked at her arm, at the 4 glowing letters that were now fully set into her skin, dark and permanent and real. She traced them slowly, Lyra, with one finger. Then she looked at Kale's wrist, at his name written in her hand, and she held his wrist gently and traced those letters too, K-A-E-L. She did not speak for a moment. Then, "I want to tell you something," she said. "Before they come in, I need to say it out loud because I have never said it to anyone, and I don't know if any version of me ever will again." "Say it," Kale said. "I think She started, then stopped, then started again. I think meeting you was the first time I have ever felt like a person. Not a tool, not a mission, not a body that needs to be maintained and reset and redirected. Her voice stayed steady but only barely. A person. With a name and a history. Even if the history was only 4 days long. It was mine, and you gave me that. Cale opened his mouth. The door opened, 3 of them. Gray uniforms, medical equipment, expressions like closed doors. They walked in without knocking, without announcing, without looking at Cale as anything other than an obstacle to move around. One of them reached for Lyra's chain. She stood up on her own before they could pull her. Chin up, back straight, eyes clear, and in that moment she looked nothing like the crying girl chained to the wall that Cale had found 4 days ago. She looked like someone who knew exactly who she was, even if she wouldn't for very long. She walked toward them. Then she stopped. She turned back to Cale one last time. The distance between them was maybe 4 steps. It felt like everything. She looked at him, really looked. The way she had learned to look at things she wanted to keep, and her lips moved slowly, forming 3 words without sound. 3 words he read them. And Cale, a soldier who had not cried since he was 9 years old, felt his eyes fill completely. They took her through the door. The door closed. The red light kept going. He stood in the empty room alone, her name still glowing on his wrist, his name somewhere on her skin, going with her into the dark. And he made himself a promise he had no idea how to keep. 3 weeks is not a long time, in the large story of the universe, in the long, indifferent timeline of stars and planets and civilizations rising and falling. 3 weeks is nothing. It is a breath, a blink, a small unremarkable pause between one moment and the next. But for Cale, those 3 weeks were the longest of his life. He was transferred 4 days after they took her. No explanation, no conversation, just new orders on his desk in the morning, new station, new assignment, new hallway to walk, new metal walls to stare at. As if distance was a cure for something. As if moving a person's body from one cold room to another cold room fixed whatever had happened inside them. It didn't. He carried it with him, all of it. Her voice, her laugh, that sudden bright laugh she kept trying to apologize for, the way she traced letters with her finger like reading Braille, the 3 words she had mouthed at the door before they took her into the dark. He carried it the way you carry something with no place to put it down. He looked at his wrist every morning, K-A-L, still there, permanent and clear. A name she had pressed into his skin with shaking hands and steady lines. He would look at it and think, somewhere out there a version of her exists with no memory of doing this. No memory of him. No memory of 4 days in a cold room where she laughed for maybe the first time. He thought about that version of her. He hoped she was less afraid on the 22nd day. A Tuesday, ordinary and gray. A transport arrived at the new station. Cale was not on duty. He was in the corridor near the eastern wing, heading to the mess hall, not thinking about anything in particular, just walking. He heard the transport doors. He heard the official voices, clipped, procedural, the voices of people doing a job. And then he saw her. She was being escorted through the corridor by 2 gray uniformed handlers. Her wrists were bound. Her head was slightly down. Her pale white hair falling forward around her blue face. She was the same. Exactly the same. Same height, same thin frame, same pointed ears, same glowing device on her forehead. Same deep blue skin like a storm held inside a person. But her eyes were different. They were blank in a way that his memory of her never was. Empty in the way a room is empty after everything has been carried out of it. She walked with the careful mechanical steps of someone following instructions, rather than going somewhere. Cale stopped breathing. She walked past him. She didn't look at him. Of course she didn't. He was nobody to her. He was a stranger in a corridor. He was a human soldier among many human soldiers. He was nothing. He stood there and watched her pass and felt the specific grief of being forgotten by someone who once looked at you, like you were worth remembering. Then she stopped. One of the handlers kept walking for a step before noticing. He turned back impatiently. "Move," he said, flat and bored. She didn't move. She was looking down at her arm. Her right arm, the inside. She had pushed her sleeve up slightly without seeming to know she was doing it. A small automatic gesture, like scratching an itch, like something her hands knew even when her mind didn't. And she was staring at the letters, still there, permanent, dark against her blue skin, glowing very faintly like an ember that refused to go out completely. She stared at them, her brow pulled together, not fear, not recognition, something between them, something that had no name yet but was trying very hard to become one. The handler grabbed her arm impatiently. "Let's go." She pulled it back. Just slightly, just enough. A small quiet resistance from someone who had been told they had no right to resist anything. She kept staring at the letters. Her finger moved, slowly, without instruction, without thought, and traced each one. Lyra. Cale was still standing in the corridor. He couldn't move. He wasn't sure he was breathing. He was watching her the way you watch something fragile sitting at the very edge of a surface, completely still, afraid that even the air moving wrong will end it. She looked up. Not at anyone specific, just up, eyes moving slowly across the corridor, the way eyes move when the mind is searching for something it cannot name. And then her eyes found him. They stopped. She looked at him the way she had looked at her own name, with that confused, searching expression, that feeling of reaching for something just slightly out of reach. Her head tilted the smallest amount. He didn't move. She took one step toward him. The handler put a hand on her shoulder. "Stop." She stopped. But her eyes didn't leave Cale's face. Her lips parted. And in a voice so quiet, it almost didn't make it across the corridor. In a voice that was uncertain and searching, and new, she said, "Do you know what this word means?" She wasn't asking the handler. She was asking him. She had chosen him out of the corridor without knowing why. "I don't know why," she continued slowly, like she was figuring out what she was saying at the same time as saying it. "But when I look at it, when I look at these letters, I feel like I should not be afraid." She looked back down at her arm. "I feel like somewhere, someone was kind to me." Cale's eyes filled. He had not cried in front of another person since he was 9 years old. He had survived things that broke other men. He had built walls inside himself that he was quietly proud of. Every single wall came down at once. He crossed the corridor in 3 steps. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to look up at him. The handlers moved forward. He held up one hand and something in his face made them stop. He looked at her, at these new empty eyes in this same face he had spent 4 days memorizing. "It's a name," he said, and his voice only broke once, on the last word. "It's your name." She looked at him. "My name," she repeated, like tasting something she hadn't eaten in a very long time. "Your name is Lyra," he said, "and you chose it yourself." Something moved across her face, slow and deep and enormous, like the first light of morning touching a place that has been dark for a very long time. Not memory. It was too soon for memory. But something older than memory. Something that lives below thought and below language in the place where a person simply knows. Her eyes went to his wrist, to the 4 letters there, dark and permanent. K-A-E-O. She stared at them. Then she looked up at his face. "Did I write that?" She whispered, "Yes," he said. "Why?" He looked at her, at this new version of the person who had held his hand in a cold room, and laughed at a stupid story, and chosen her own name, and faced the end of herself with more dignity than most people face anything. "Because you wanted someone to carry proof that you existed," he said quietly. "And I wanted to." She looked at him for a long time. The handlers were impatient. The corridor was busy. The world outside this small moment had absolutely no interest in pausing for it. But she kept looking, and then, so slowly, so carefully, like someone touching something they are not sure is real, she smiled. Not the sad small smile he had seen before, not the one with giving up hiding inside it. Something newer, something that didn't have the weight of 3 resets and 100 forgotten days pressed into it. Something that looked, just slightly, like the beginning of trust. "I don't remember you," she said softly. "I know, but I think," she said, still looking at his face with those searching new eyes. "I think I would like to." The handlers took her down the corridor. Cale stood and watched her go. This time, When she reached the end of the corridor and the handler reached for the door, she turned around. She looked back at him one more time, and this time she didn't mouth words she thought he might not hear. This time she said it out loud, clear and quiet, across the corridor, with a voice that had no memory of him, but some deeper thing that hadn't been erased. "Thank you." The door closed. Cale stood in the corridor alone, his wrist against his chest, her name against his heartbeat, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he smiled.